Would you bow with me in prayer? Almighty God, let now the words of my mouth and the meditations of each one of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. For you are our rock, our strength, and our Redeemer. Amen. I am a youngest child. Are there any other younger children out there? You know, back in the early 20th century, Alfred Ulmer, a psychologist from Austria, developed a birth order theory which related certain personality traits to birth order in the family. Jeremy Kamenofsky describes it in this way, quote, "Firstborn children tend to be natural leaders." He theorized because parents tend to shower them with attention, and younger children tend to look up to their big siblings for guidance. However, firstborn kids tend to struggle with a sense of dethronement when a younger one comes along, feeling that this new little interloper has knocked them off the pedestal of their parents' love, unquote. Adler's theory makes sense in families where one child is born and receives all of its parents' attention for the first couple of years, and then another child comes along. But I wonder if it holds true for children who are twins, like Jacob and Esau. Isaac and Rebekah's sons were fraternal rather than identical twins. Esau was strong and red and hairy, while Jacob was weaker and retiring and witty. The story says that Rebekah was barren. She prayed to God, and eventually she became pregnant with twins, a double blessing. Or was it? It was not an easy pregnancy. Rebekah had two very active babies who struggled within her womb. It must have been incredibly painful because she cried out to God, "If it is thus, why do I live?" And God replied, "Two nations are in your womb, and two people born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger." This pronouncement that God gives is outrageous. That's not the way that things worked in their society. The eldest son was supposed to be the one who inherited power. He received a double portion of his father's wealth. The youngest son knew that his brother would one day inherit his father's possessions and his role in society and his power and his blessing. And yet, our God is known for turning the world upside down. God doesn't buy into human power structures and expectations. Rabbi Jeremy Kamenofsky suggests that unlike societal expectations for the day, quote, "The most recognizable pattern in the narrative of Genesis, and to some extent the whole Hebrew Bible, is that younger brothers win out, surprising us every time by ascending to leadership and playing key roles in the destiny of the Jewish people. The big brothers never seem to be worthy of that role that they would inherit. And with God's help, the little guys almost invariably dethrone them. Genesis has seen this in the patterns of the lives of Isaac, who supplants Ishmael, Jacob, who supplants Esau, Rachel, who is more beloved than the elder Leah, and especially Jacob's children, including the beloved son Joseph, who supplants 10 older brothers and a sister, unquote. We see the patterns and expectations that are the same in our society today, the same ones that existed when Jacob and Esau were born. They might not have called it the old boys network, but position and power inherited and passed down in families to eldest sons. With twins, the first child out of the womb received the birthright and then the blessing. Second, nothing. Even if they were born only moments apart. It seems an unfair system today, but that was standard when Rebekah gave birth. Esau and Jacob struggled, not only in the womb, but throughout their entire lives. These twins could not have been more different. And if we look at this story as metaphor for what's happening in their society, we will find that there are Esau's, who are hunter-gatherers. These people who have been in power for years were strong, sometimes violent, aggressive leaders who went out into the wilderness for long periods of time to hunt and to kill animals to feed the rest of the tribe. This way of life had been a given for many years. Then things began to change. People discovered that you could plant seeds and grow food in one place. Hunting was no longer necessary for survival. As the agrarian society began to evolve, hunter-gatherers learned that their skills were being supplanted by those who wanted to settle in one place. Food could be grown. Animals could be raised by shepherds. Tribes no longer had to follow the herds in order to survive. As hunter-gatherers became less vital to the lives of the tribe, shepherd farmers started to replace them, taking on a new and different kind of power. You no longer had to be the biggest and strongest and most aggressive guy to find power. You could be physically weak, but smart and cunning. Your intellect and craftiness could help you make it to the top. These Jacobs began to gain power by using their wit and manipulating their environment. It is clear that Jacob and Esau are more than just two people. They represent not only two ways of life, but two entire nations. Esau represents Edom, and Jacob represents Israel. Some describe Esau as a big lug who is an uncouth glutton. He's been called stupid, thoughtless, uncaring. He's described as big and hairy and red, shaggy, physically strong, dim-witted, impulsive, melodramatic, and needing immediate gratification. Lest you think that Jacob is any better, he's described as a trickster, a weak mommy's boy, a supplanter, a retiring man who kept to his tents instead of going out into the world. When Jacob came out of the womb, he was grabbing on to his brother's heel. Jacob is described as sneaky and opportunistic, manipulative and without compassion. Jacob knew exactly what he wanted, and he determined to get it, regardless of the price that meant his brother might have to pay. Jacob is the winner in this story. He not only gains the birthright, but he steals his father's blessing just 2 chapters later. Even still, he is the one who God uses to fulfill the promise that Abraham's offspring would number as the stars. Richard Weiss reflects on this situation, saying, quote, "God takes the side of the upstarts, those on the margins of society, those without society's privileges and preferences. God is the bringer of social change as a part of God's overall purpose to return creation and all of its inhabitants to a state of wholeness originally intended for them." Unquote. These archetypal characters, Jacob and Esau, are relatively easy to identify in our society today. There are those who have physical power, power that often comes with violence and bullying. And there are those who are seen as less important, marginalized, subservient. We see big, strong Esau coming home famished and ready to trade away his birthright for a bowl of stew, and we are shocked at the disregard that Esau shows for his family lineage and how important immediate gratification was for him. Jacob, on the other hand, is an opportunistic trickster who manipulates the situation to his own benefit. He does whatever it takes to get what he wants. Jacob buys Esau's birthright and steals his blessing because that is really his only option. Jacob was born with no power. If he wants to get anywhere in his life, he has to find ways to confront a dysfunctional society that excludes younger brothers from becoming powerful people. Since the end of May, our country has been involved in a deep power struggle over the way that people of color are treated. Racism is rampant, not just in our nation, but in our entire world. The Jacobs, the little guys with no power, are going up against the Esau's, who are the embodiment of institutional power. They have taken to the street to protest. The interesting thing about this movement is that it's no longer only the Jacobs who are out there protesting police brutality. More and more people have witnessed the murders of African American people like George Floyd and so many others, and are calling for a change. As the power shifts, the Esau's feel manipulated and slighted and unappreciated. The Jacobs have turned out in massive numbers with the hopes of changing a system to one that is more equitable and less racist. On July 3rd, the New York Times reported the recent protests, quote, peaked on June 6th, when 500,000 people turned out across 550 places across the United States. That was a single day in more than a month's worth of protests that still continue today. 4 recent polls suggest that about 15 million to 26 million people in the United States have participated in demonstrations over the death of George Floyd and others in recent weeks. These figures would make the recent protests the largest movement in the country's history, unquote. The protests are not the only struggles that exist in our society. We are living in an age where there's a deep political divide between parties, where feelings run high, where compromise is nowhere to be found. We also live in a time of pandemic, where some people are being incredibly careful about spreading the virus, and others ignore experts' advice to wear masks and to social distance because it makes them look weak or because it impinges on their freedom. There are people who epitomize Esau with their need for immediate gratification. Bars and beaches reopen and people flock to them, letting down their guard and forgetting about the safety of others. Their need for a good time or for a drink is more important than their birthright. They choose fun over safety. Reverend Monica Gubit writes about this need for immediate gratification and where it connects in our culture of addiction in our society. She says, quote, as Esau comes in from hunting, famished and distracted, Jacob offers stew with the condition of giving up his birthright. Esau loses track of what is important in the long term. and Jacob exploits his brother's short-sightedness. It is our sibling rivalry as we fight for the blessing of our parents, our families, our communities. It is our struggle when the deal, which seems so good at the moment, seems not nearly so good when viewed in the light of eternity. In America, millions of people struggle with addiction to drugs and or alcohol, and other addictions as well. This is your brother, your aunt, your dad, your neighbor, your cousin, your daughter, you. Opioid addiction affects people across the globe and in our communities, unquote. Esau's impulsiveness and disregard for the long-term consequences remind us of huge segments of our population who make poor choices because they need an immediate fix. They need that next drink or pill so badly that they must sell a family heirloom in order to satisfy their addiction. Gupat says, quote, like Jacob, we find ourselves imagining that there is only one blessing to receive. There is only one birthright to be given. So we must rush in and make sure that no one else gets it. Others of us, like Esau, find ourselves so stuck in the hold of addiction, ready to give up everything just for a fix, unquote. Does there have to be a winner and a loser? Is there some way that sibling struggles and the rifts in our nation and in our world can be transformed with shared power? A place where all people are equal? Can we let go of the notion that there is only one birthright to be had and that others are all out of luck? Romans reminds us that the Spirit of God dwells in each of us. When we find ourselves pitted against each other, rather than digging in, let us see if we can understand those who differ from us. Let us find ways to see the face of God in all humanity, whether you're the youngest or the oldest, an Esau or a Jacob. God loves you. Alleluia.